It was late in the evening when Kay arrived. The village was deep in snow. The castle hill was hidden, veiled in mist and darkness, nor was there even a glimmer of light to show that a castle was there at all. On the wooden bridge leading from the main road to the village, Kay stood for a long time, gazing up into the apparent void above him. Then he went to find lodging for the night. The inn was still awake, and though the landlord could not provide a room and was upset by such a late and unexpected arrival, he was willing to let Kay sleep on a bag of straw in the parlor. Kay accepted the offer. Some of the peasants were still lingering over their beer, but he did not want to talk, and after fetching for himself a bag of straw from the attic, he lay down beside the stove. It was a warm corner. The peasants were quiet, and as he let his weary eyes stray over them, he fell asleep. But very shortly he was awakened. A young man dressed like a townsman, with the face of an actor, his eyes narrow and his eyebrows strongly marked, was standing beside him along with the landlord. The peasants were still in the room, and a few of them had now turned their chairs around so as to see and hear better. The young man apologized very courteously for having awakened Kay. He introduced himself as the son of a castle official. He then added, "This village belongs to the castle, and whoever lives here or passes the night here does so, in a manner of speaking, in the castle itself. Nobody may do that without the Count's permission, but you have no such permit, or at least you have produced none." Kay had by now half raised himself, smoothing down his hair, and looking at the two men he said, "What village is this I have wandered into? Is there a castle here?" "Most certainly," the young man replied slowly, while here and there a head was shaken over Kay's remark. "It is the castle of my lord, the Count West-West." "And must one have a permit to sleep here?" asked Kay, as if he wished to assure himself that what he had heard was not a dream. "One must have a permit," was the reply, and there was an ironical contempt for Kay in the young man's gesture as he stretched out his arm and appealed to the others. "Or must one not have a permit?" "Well then, I'll have to go and get one," said Kay, yawning and pushing his blanket away as if to get up. "And from whom, pray?" asked the young man. "From the Count," said Kay. "That's the only thing that is to be done, it seems." "A permit from the Count in the middle of the night," cried the young man, stepping back a pace. "Is that impossible?" inquired Kay coolly. "Then why did you waken me?" At this point the young man flew into a rage. "None of your gutter-snipe manners," he cried. "I must insist on respect for the Count's authority. I woke you up to inform you that you must leave the Count's territory at once." "Enough of this fooling around," said Kay in a markedly quiet voice, laying down again and pulling up the blanket. "You've gone a little too far, my good fellow, and I'll have something to say tomorrow about your conduct. The landlord here and those other gentlemen will bear me out if necessary. Let me tell you that I'm the land surveyor, whom the Count is expecting. My assistants are coming on tomorrow in a carriage with the apparatus. I did not want to miss the chance of a walk through the snow, but unfortunately lost my way several times and so arrived very late, that it was too late to present myself at the castle I knew very well before you saw fit to inform me. That is why I have made shift with this bed for the night, where, to put it mildly, you have had the discourtesy to disturb me. That is all I have to say. Good night, gentlemen." With this, Kay turned over on his side toward the stove. "Land surveyor," he heard the hesitating question behind his back, and then there was general silence. But the young man soon recovered his assurance and, lowering his voice sufficiently to appear considerate of Kay's sleep while yet speaking loud enough to be clearly heard, said to the landlord, "I'll ring up and inquire." So there was a telephone in the village inn. Everything was evidently quite up to date. Kay was at first surprised, but on the whole he supposed that he had expected it. It seemed that the telephone was almost over his head, and in his drowsy condition he had overlooked it. If the young man must use the telephone, he could not, even with the best intentions, avoid disturbing Kay. The only question was whether Kay would let him do so. He decided to allow it. In that case, however, there was no point in pretending to sleep, so he turned on his back again. You could see the peasants putting their heads together. The arrival of a land surveyor was no small event. And now the telephone conversation began. The castle official was asleep, but one of his underlings, a certain Herr Fritz, was available. The young man, announcing himself as Schwarzer, reported that he had found Kay, a disreputable-looking man in his 30s, sleeping calmly on a bag of straw with a tiny rucksack for a pillow and a knotty stick within reach. He had naturally suspected the fellow, and as the landlord had obviously neglected his duty, he, Schwarzer, had felt bound to investigate the matter. He had roused the man, questioned him, and duly warned him off the Count's territory, all of which Kay had taken but an ill grace, perhaps with some justification, as it eventually turned out, for he claimed to be a land surveyor engaged by the Count. Of course, to say the least, that was a statement which required official confirmation. And so Schwarzer begged Herr Fritz to inquire in the Central Bureau if a land surveyor was really expected, and to telephone the answer at once. There was silence while Fritz was making inquiries up there, and the young man was waiting for the answer. Kay did not change his position, did not even turn around once. He seemed quite indifferent and stared into space. Schwarzer's report, and its combination of malice and prudence, gave him an idea of the measure of diplomacy in which even underlings in the castle, like Schwarzer, were versed, nor were they lacking in industry. A central office at a night service, and apparently answered questions quickly too, for Fritz was already ringing. His reply seemed brief enough, for Schwarzer hung up the receiver immediately, crying angrily, "Just what I thought!" There is no trace of a land surveyor. He is a common, lying tramp, probably something much worse. For a moment, Kay thought that all of the Schwarzer, the peasants, and the landlord were going to fall on him in a body, and to escape at least the first shock of their assault, he crawled right underneath the blanket. But the telephone rang again, with a special insistence. It seemed that Kay, slowly, he put his head out. Although it was improbable that this message also concerned Kay, they all stopped short, and Schwarzer took up the receiver once more. He listened to a fairly long statement, and then said in a very low voice, "A mistake, is it? I'm very sorry to hear that the head of the department himself said so. And how am I to explain this to the land surveyor?" Kay pricked up his ears. So the castle had recognized him as the land surveyor. He waved off Schwarzer, who was timidly approaching him, and refused an urgent invitation to transfer himself into the landlord's own room. He only accepted a warm drink from the landlord, and a basin to wash in, a piece of soap, and a towel. He did not even have to ask that the room be cleared, for all the men flocked out with averted faces, lest he should recognize them again the next day. The lamp was blown out, and he was left in peace at last. He slept deeply until morning, scarcely disturbed by rats scuttling past. Once,